Well, so they could understand it, but for example, here's the great example. Remember last week, the end of the week, or the end of the thing, I said, okay, the temple is the house on the rock. So whose house is built on the sand? So why would Jesus not say that evil, and in fact he does later, right? That evil viper Herod, why would he allude to the house on the sand?
Could get killed where Herod's house was.
Well, because if you said it out loud, what would happen to you? Snick snack, right? So just like, remember John complained about Herod's wife, and what happened to John? Right? If you complain about Pilate, what happens?
Off with your head.
Right? So why do you hide your cultural illusions? So you can communicate them to the people without losing your life. This is a great idea. I mean, especially if you're going to be a prophet and you're going to last very long. So, you know, we tend to take these things as simplistic, and they're not. They're not simplistic at all. So, this is a question of veracity. And I was hoping that we had some new people that were, you know, I think, because a lot of you have heard this before, so I'm going to try to do this very quickly. But, you know, the question of proving veracity, that is historical, is it history? The question is about Matthew. Can we consider Matthew to be history? Or is it just a religious book, like the Bhagavad Gita, or like the Book of the Dead? Well, there are ways in history to prove these things. And so how do you prove them? The way you can prove history is you use a legal historical method. I've been into that before. But do you remember the 3 ways of telling truth in the world? Can you remember that? What? Scientific method, legal historical method, and logic. Now, we don't think much about the legal historical method because for some reason it's been expurgated from our teaching, which really bothers me. Because how many have heard of the scientific method? Right? We live and die by the scientific method.
Almost.
But unless you've been in one of my classes, have you ever heard of the legal historical method? Do you know that's the method we use to put people to death in this country and put them in jail? The legal historical method is what is used by lawyers in every courtroom, in every city, in every state, and across the world. Because the legal historical method is the means to prove the truth of something that is a unique thing, something that happens in time. So for the scientific method, we use that to prove repeatable events, something that can be repeated. And the legal historical method is used to prove those things which are not repeatable. They can't be repeatable. So, great question. Can I prove the creation using scientific method? Doesn't matter if it's 6 days. It doesn't matter if it's 1,000,000 years. If it's a creation, if there is a singular creation, can I prove it using the scientific method? No, because it's not repeatable. Can I prove evolution using scientific method? No. Unless it's repeatable, well, it's not repeatable. By definition, evolution isn't repeatable, right? So, you know, what you have to look at is, you know, as a scientist, and I'm a scientist, so as a scientist, you have to look at things and say, well, do they fit in the scientific method category, or they fit in the legal historical method category? Now, some parts of evolution you might be able to prove, you can prove using the scientific method. And likewise, some aspects of creation or of the universe you can prove using scientific method. But these are all building blocks and pieces and parts. So in the world of science, we take these things, the scientific method, the legal historical method. Now, the legal historical method is a way we use to prove history, right? Unless you think history is repeatable. By the way, some people do think history is repeatable.
Certainly repeats itself.
Well, does it really repeat itself?
No.
No.
We
No.
make the same dumb mistakes over and over again.
But-
Nature is
but
Said
peop-
that if you don't learn from history, you're bound to repeat it.
Right. But you really never repeat it, right?
No.
That's the point, unfortunately. So, you know, that's the point, that historical events are unique events. And so what we do is we have tests. And I'll just review those tests. The first test is, anybody remember what the first test is called? I didn't write them on your sheet, so you can't cheat. Bibliographical. Bibliographical. And in the bibliographical test, there are two aspects of it, A and B. The first one is in the bibliographical test simply looks at bibliographical, biblio. Now we know, as good Greek scholars, we know that biblio really means papyrus, right? It doesn't have anything to do with Bible. It doesn't have anything to do with gathering together documents. It's papyrus sheets. But that's okay, because in English, a Bible is a what? A compendium of books, or a compendium of text. So, bibliographical obviously relates to texts of some kind, texts. So, in the bibliographical test, we look at the validity of the texts, of the text. So we're asking the question, are the manuscripts that we have, are they, how good are they? How good are they? And you got to remember this. How many manuscripts do we have from works of antiquity, original manuscripts do we have from works of antiquity? Zero. There are no originals from any works of antiquity at all. None. So there's no originals of anything from antiquity. And what is antiquity? Antiquity, this is just a general measure, okay? CA, circa around 600 AD, is considered about the time, in that era that's when antiquity kind of stops. Now, some people will push it all the way up into 1400 AD. Why? Why do you think? What's the big deal in 1400 AD? Gutenberg Press, that's exactly right. So after the Gutenberg Press, we get a lot of copies, but they're no longer, they're not manuscripts. Because what's a manuscript? Handwritten, you see? Now, after 600 AD, does anybody know what radically happened after 600 AD? Well, there's two events in the world that we kind of measure at 600 AD. Number one is the rise of Islam. And the other one is the rise of libraries. Now, there were libraries before this, but in about 600 AD, what started happening, and by the way, that's approximately the Dark Ages, right? In the Dark Ages, what was the big deal that the Catholic Church, and this is why people really get down the Catholic Church during this period, which I think is silly, because what they did really saved us. What did they do?
Ordered every manuscript they could find.
And did what with them?
Studied them.
Copied them. Study is great, but they copied them. Sometimes they couldn't even read them, but they copied them. See? So, in 600 AD, you had the rise of Islam. And why did they start doing this? What caused this? The rise of Islam caused a fervor in both the Christian world and in the Jewish world.
They were burning stuff up.
Well, not only were they burning stuff up, but there's something else that happened. The Quran. The Quran was reputed to be the word of God taken from Muhammad, right? And so, the early church carried their codexes. And so with the rise of Islam, what did you suddenly have? Someone else with a codex that they were carrying around. And so, what did that mean for your documents? You needed more of them, right? Because if somebody else has, if his Islamic guy comes around and says, I have the word of God from Muhammad right here in my hand, the Quran, and you say, cool, then what does the Christian and the Jewish guy have to do? Here's mine. It trumps, right? See? That's why it's very difficult to talk about inspiration in historical sense. You know why, right? If a Christian says, here's my inspired book, what does Islamic person say? Here's my inspired book. And what does a Jewish person say? Well, here's my inspired. Well, luckily, Jewish and Christians have the same inspired books, kinda. We talked about in the Apocryphal class. But then, so does the Bhagavad Gita, so the Hindus, so the Buddhists. Everybody has an inspired book. So you're not going to get very far with that. But in any case, in 600 AD, you see a rise of copying of manuscripts like crazy. Yes, sir?
Was there a dominant religion among those people prior to the rise of Islam, or was it just a whole scattering of religions that they practiced?
Islam is a mysterion. And what you find, yes, pantheonic paganism, which I'll talk about in a minute, was pretty much rampant. Animism and pantheonic paganism are rampant in that world, especially animism, because they're pre-literate. Muhammad was not literate. Muhammad, there's always a big fight, but we know Muhammad was not literate. He was like Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith wasn't literate either. He's the founder of Mormonism. He dictated it, the Quran, like Joseph Smith dictated the Book of Mormon to a writer. So, in any case,
Have you ever done the historical veracity of the Quran?
Yes. Merritt, I did in one of these classes, I think. I do it when I talk about, I have a general class where I teach overall veracity of the New Testament documents and all the documents around it, which is really neat because you get to see every document in antiquity that we know of that are, even close to Christianity. And in that, the last couple of classes are to look at all other religious documents to compare the veracity of them. So you can do that. And Merritt, I gave you a chart. That's, the chart, I think in one of the classes, I think the apocryphal class, when I did veracity, I think I gave you the chart that is of those documents, which is, it's odd because I usually don't give it to church groups per se. Not because it's bad, but because, usually most church groups are interested in what? The New Testament documents and their stuff. They're not interested in finding out much about Buddhism or Hinduism or the Book of the Dead. But I think the more knowledge you have, and Paul said this too to Timothy, the more knowledge you have, the better it makes you an apologist for what you know, right? And the better able you are to basically, fend other people's thoughts or ideas if they're contrary or, in any case. But, so, the tests are these. Anybody remember the tests? Because I taught these before. The two tests.
Internal.
Nope, that's next. The tests are the number of manuscripts. Let's do this. Number of manuscripts. Why? Why the number of manuscripts?
How important is it to you? How much do you want to repeat it?
Well, not just that. If I have just, let's say, okay, remember, none of them are the originals. So let's say I have one manuscript from something that was written 600 years ago. How do I know that it's the original words of what was written 600 years ago?
You don't.
Now let's say I have three. And okay, this is what you got to know. In all three, are the three the same?
No.
They're going to be just a little bit different. It's always true. You always find a little bit different manuscript because they were written by different people, right? So I compare the manuscripts and I can compare them, and guess what I can do? I can resolve the manuscripts. What if I have 100 of them?
The more you have, the better.
The more you have, the better. So in ancient documents, about the average, anybody remember, I've taught you this before, what's the average number of documents we have for stuff in antiquity?
6.
3. And 3 is considered pretty good. Some stuff we only have one piece, but pretty good is about 3. Now, for example, we have of Pliny, we have 7 copies, and Plato's works we have 7. These are the better ones. Euripides we have 9, Caesar's Gallic Wars we have 10 copies. Of Aristotle, all of Aristotle's works we have 49. Of Sophocles' works we have 193. Of the New Testament documents in toto, that's all the books of the New Testament, we have 24,000 plus. And I think, let's see, I don't have it right here in this chart. Let's see, I have it in another chart. We have, oh man, where's that? I have a chart, okay, it's not in this, I didn't put it in my thing. All right. The number of documents we have of Matthew specifically is we have around, I think it's around 70-something documents of Matthew specifically. So, and there's more. These are early date documents.